So, in a complete unexpected turn of events, during the latest Nintendo Partner Direct, Capcom just announced their brand new game, Monster Hunter Stories 3, the sequel to the 2021 Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin. So in today's video we're going to be talking about Monster Hunter Stories 3, when we can expect to see the game be released, along with a few more details that Capcom has released beyond just the trailer, where they go a bit more in depth about the game's mechanics and gameplay, how they plan to change things up, as well as the story and the setting of Monster Hunter Stories 3. So I am first going to be rewatching the trailer, then we're moving on to the analysis and covering some of the interviews that Capcom released about the game. And man, just straight away I love the art style, the way that the game looks. It feels a lot more, I don't know, it just feels like they have kind of grown up with the art style, a lot more detailed but still has a lot of the charm from Monster Hunter Stories. Look at those character models, dude. The game looks fantastic. Dude, look at that scene. I know it's just a cutscene, but I think that the art style really complements that. That is so beautiful. The classic Stories theme in the background.
This is proving fatal. The encroachment threatens to drive our people out of house and home.
Velociprayers are back.
But this divide has brought our two kingdoms to the brink of war.
And you are the sole Rathalos rider in a
Just looks so good.
My people have been driven into a corner.
Look at that character design. Ragnar Kadaki, of course.
Can't afford not to go. I cross the meridian and keep going. But it won't be for long.
Oh man, and then look at Magnum Malo aura farming. I'm so excited for this game, dude. So excited. Monster Hunter Stories 3, the Twisted Reflection, and of course with the two Rathalos in the background, because as you can see from this final scene,
overlapping each other.
There they are. The two baby Rathas with the glowing horn. Now, in case some of you are new to the Monster Hunter franchise, you came in and joined us with Wilds for the first time, or maybe just never had a chance to play Stories before, these games are basically your creature collecting, training and then battling type of game. So think of an experience that is similar to Pokemon, but of course in the Monster Hunter setting, but you interact a lot more with these monsters. You can find all kinds of monster eggs and hatch them, you will be able to train them, have them inherit different genes so you can give them different skills, so you can have a party of some very powerful monsters. And it's super cool to take these more powerful monsters into the endgame like we did with Stories 2, where they had a ton of DLC updates, free title updates I should say. All of it was free of charge, and we were able to fight against Kulftaroth, Fatalis. It was crazy and it was awesome. And I should also mention that there is a lot more focus on character development, the narrative and the plot, and given that we are now in this medieval fantasy setting, we're likely going to see some wars, some politics, maybe a bit of espionage and everything. So I have some very high hopes for what we're going to be getting with Stories 3. They kind of give the feel that it might potentially be somewhat open worldish, kind of like taking the big open areas of Stories 2 and making them much bigger. And of course another cool thing about the Stories games is that you can play them in multiplayer, so you can hang around with your friends and be collecting eggs together and then go fight a big monster, or even do some PvP, because there's PvP in these games. So all in all, incredibly exciting. And of course another cool detail about Stories 3 is that they showed a couple of monsters from Monster Hunter Rise, namely Ragnar Kadaki and Magnum Malo. So this of course opens up the doors for us to get many more monsters from Rise, so we can get stuff like Gossarag, Lunagaron, Garangolm, and potentially even Malzeno. There's a lot of very cool and unique monsters from Rise that I think kind of go under the radar in the fandom, because not as many people are fans of Rise as they are of World and Wilds. So I hope that they bring a lot more monsters from Rise and do make them good as look as Ragnar Kadaki and Magnum Malo look in the this trailer. I also hope that they add monsters from Wilds like Arkveld, Raydal, and Jindahad. I think having those 3 monsters in Stories 3 would be amazing to tame them and then train them and ride them. I mean, can you just think about having a Jindahad in your party? That would be crazy. Also, another thing about Stories is that in the previous games we were unable to use all of our weapons because you don't just fight with the monsters, you also fight as your own hunter that you get to customize, and then you can craft different weapons. And in Stories 2, I believe that we only had up to 6 different weapon types. Not all 14 weapons were available, so I hope that they try to add a few more, potentially all 14 weapons, because I think that was one of the few aspects that I found lacking in Stories 2. That said, let's now move on to the big details that have been revealed in interviews. So here we have their official website. We can see the twin Rathalos here with the glowing horns. This is likely going to have a big significance in the story, of course, and I didn't mention this before, but despite the game having been revealed during the Nintendo Direct, it will be available on the Nintendo Switch 2, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam. So basically every platform available, you'll be able to play the game. That is fantastic. I hope it's a day one release for all of these platforms, though currently the only release date that we know of is going to be 2026. So on their press release for Monster Hunter Stories 3, it mentions that the game tells the story of 2 nations on the path to ruin. Amidst the growing crystal encroachment facing the lands of Azuria and Vermeil, the discovery of a mysterious egg gives cause for hope. From the shell hatches a monster long thought to be extinct, a Rathalos. However, this glimmer quickly gives way to despair as a second monster emerges from the egg. The twin Rathalos share the same mark as the twin Skyscale Rathalos, portents of destruction that harken back to a civil war waged 200 years ago. As the environment deteriorates and monsters face extinction, the flames of war once again begin to stir. In this tale, players take on the role of the heir to Azuria, blessed with special abilities leading them to become the leader of the Rangers and sole Rathalos rider in the kingdom. The protagonist passionately performs their duties protecting monsters and investigating egg quartz. However, a life-changing event soon drives them to investigate these strange phenomena threatening the world. In their search for the truth, they set out for the Forbidden Land beyond the Northern Meridian. The hero is joined on their quest by Eleanor, the princess of Vermeil, so the other kingdom. Troubled by the worsening situation, she offers herself as a hostage to Azuria in hopes of easing tensions between the 2 nations. Moved by the efforts of the Rangers, Eleanor and her cherished Monstie Anjanath, so it looks like Anjanath is going to be our partner, come along for the ride, seeking to uncover the true intentions of her sister, the Queen of Vermeil. Bound together by the encroaching shadow of calamity, they step into the torrent of fate and venture into forbidden ground. So like I said, there's going to be a war between 2 different kingdoms, and there's going to be a secret plot behind everything, a shadowy organization. That kind of stuff is likely going to be the plot of the game. The one cool detail about these 2 lands, so Azuria, which is where our protagonist is from, and Vermeil, which is where the NPC Eleanor is from, these naturally invoke that it's the Blue Kingdom and the Red Kingdom, but it could also be a reference to the Azure and Silver Rathalos pair, potentially foreshadowing them appearing later on in the game. And shout out to Kogath. If you guys want to see some more stuff about Monster Hunter Stories 3, I recommend that you follow him. He's always on top of everything. But here you can see the official render for our protagonist, both the male and the female protagonist. You can even see the official render for Eleanor, and of course the official render for our boy Magnum Mallow. I absolutely love this guy. I think he was a fantastic flagship monster in Monster Hunter Rise. His theme is amazing as well, and he looks stunning in this render, so I cannot wait to play with him. Oh, and we also get these renders of the different Rathalos with the different glowing horns. It looks to be the same Rathalos here, since the glowing horn is on the left side on both pictures. So maybe the other twin is going to be tamed by the evil character or a rival character, something like that. Again, we don't really have a lot of details as to when the game is going to be released, but we can speculate based on a couple of things. So with a quick Google search, we can find that Monster Hunter Stories 2 was announced also on a Nintendo Direct mini partner showcase back in September 17 of 2020, and the game then went on to be released on July 9, 2021. And I should also mention that this was around the time of the pandemic, so maybe they even wanted to release the game a little bit earlier, but they had to postpone it a little bit because of the pandemic halting a lot of development, as it often did for a lot of video games that released around that time. So given that Stories 2 released 10 months after the game was initially announced, I could honestly see them doing pretty much the same thing here for Stories 3, potentially even earlier, because again, now we don't have to deal with a global pandemic. So that could mean that we can expect Stories 3 to be released anywhere between April and June of 2026. That is the ballpark of where I would give a release date for the game. Though given that WoW's released on February 28th of this year and they likely have an expansion planned to be released in the next year, they will probably make sure that those two dates do not conflict with each other. So I would also put like a 4-month gap between the release of the WoW's expansion and the release of Stories 3, something like that, to not cannibalize the sales of each product. Ultimately, I am incredibly excited for Stories 3. I had a blast with Stories 2 and honestly I regret not making more content for the game when it initially released. I did make a video somewhat recently about the remake of Monster Hunter Stories 1, as Capcom allowed me to play the game a couple of months before it released, so if you want to know more about that game, you can find more about that on the channel. But if you haven't played Stories 1 or 2, I highly recommend that you give it a shot, especially 2, I absolutely love it, and I'm very excited about the evolution of the series, because if you think about it, with Stories 1, you are essentially playing with just children characters that then grow up and become relevant characters. In Stories 2, where you're playing as a teenager, and now in Stories 3, it looks like you're going to be playing as a young adult. I wonder if this is going to take place in the same universe as Stories 1 and 2. Are we going to see callbacks to some of the previous characters? I think that would be pretty interesting, but this was definitely the highlight of the Direct for me. I really did not expect it to be announced there, so very happy about this. Let me know if you guys are excited for Stories 3 and when you expect the game to be released. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting!